Hi, and welcome to another session of Venture and Capital interviews. Today I have the managing partner of My Accounts, Noel. Welcome to the session.
Thanks for having me, Steve. Appreciate it.
Now, how I met Noel, just to give a bit of context, was that basically it was about this time last year where we realised that we basically had to improve our accounts receivable. Now, if you've been on some of our other sessions, you would have noticed that we do a lot of work with Alicia Lykos from Wedwolf. And Alicia was kind enough to introduce us to Noel. She said, you're going to get along really well with him. You'll you guys have good relationship and so forth. Anyway, so I met Noel. Yes, we did hit it off straight away, and I'll explain why in a second. And then the sort of relationship went from there. So look, what I'll start with now, by the way, where we're going to start with this conversation is not where we're going to finish, right? Where we're going to start is on the account, but where we're going to move to is around leadership and sort of working with teams and building teams and so forth. So to kick off, Noel, do you want to give a bit of a background to yourself and also to the work you do with My Accounts?
Of course. So yes, I'm the managing partner of My Accounts, as Steve said before. I've been there at My Accounts for 13 years. I didn't found the company, but worked my way up and through. And in December of 2016, we actually got investment on board, and we formed a board. And through that process, I took over as a managing partner, and there was a bit of a reshuffle there. And since then, we've been pushing to grow our services across Australia-wide, with now offices in Sydney, Melbourne, and Philippines, but servicing small businesses all over Australia.
And how do you service them?
Yeah, well, our focus is on remote now. We're just trying to take advantage of all the technology that's available, right? So we really were blessed, and the timing of Xero's takeoff really coincided. We jumped on board early, and we've just followed that through. And I think that part of that helped us and enabled us to be able to use our systems and processes to service these remotely, which actually did help with profitability. But also on the client side, it actually helped us to be able to service our clients more regularly. When you take out travel time, and perhaps you might have been able to experience this, Steve, with the receivables that we did for you at the beginning. We can allocate time every day as opposed to traveling to your office. And then because of that, you want to try and consolidate the time. So you do receivables say once a week because we're consolidating the time. But whereas because we're working remotely, we could just get on the blower every day.
Well, that's what to me, that's what I loved about dealing with you guys, right? So just as far as context, and I want to make this valuable for everyone that's listening. Yes. So receivable is one of the most challenging parts for every company, no matter where, and we hear it from our clients as well. So this is why I think this is just it's one of those topics where it's typically not exciting and sexy, but it's fundamentally important for all of us. And it's a frustration typically we'll have that we're not really talking about.
But what is exciting or sexy is when it starts to work. And
correct. Very true.
That is much exciting. Yeah.
So look, now, when sort of trying to do it, I found that we had it set up previously before working with you guys. We were looking to do it sort of internally, but of course we weren't sort of really big enough to have someone that was their sort of full-time focus. Yeah. So it was pretty much a setup where it was someone that was sort of doing it part-time, and we weren't sort of really geared up for it. And it just basically similar scenario. We actually took on investment and we started growing, and we only basically uncovered the issue as we started accelerating growth. Right? And I'm sure you've seen that.
Yeah.
Say that again.
Does it build the plane as you fly it? Is that the same?
Yeah. And that was sort of the challenge we started to have. And I didn't really know the solution. And unfortunately, I said, we reached out to Alicia, said, look, this is it. And then she introduced me to you. And the best thing was, like, literally since that day, like the efficiency in that area is just another level. Like, and the best thing that you did for me, right, is what I like to try and help founders do on the capital raising front, is that you helped to normalize my experience, right? You helped to normalize for me what I was going through as a founder. And the challenge that I have is that typically people make you feel like, you often feel like what you're going through is something unique. And then you go and speak to someone like you and it's like, oh, everyone's dealing with it. So let's go through this, Noel. What do most founders sort of typically deal with in this, let's say, accounts receivable area, and then also in the accounts payable area, just to help sort of set a foundation?
Yeah. So I think I'll break down almost every issue, and you can speak to my team, and they probably get sick of me saying this. If there's ever an issue, I ask this question, which is it an error in process or a failure to follow process? Is it a failure of process or a failure to follow process, isn't it? And what I typically find is you start with process. There's often a breakdown in the process itself. So you might not have clearly articulated right from the beginning, like your credit terms and things like that. So you got to break it back down right to the beginning and go, all right. So and with fresh eyes, it's a lot easier, right? So when you're in there and you're trying to do it, you kind of lose that perspective. Like you said, that this is something that kind of happens everywhere. So you start at the beginning, and so we come in. What are your credit terms? Show us some of your engagement docs. Show us some of the info, and then we can rebuild from there and just put really clear systems and processes in place for both us internally servicing it, but also I think the critical part is that those systems and processes then become learned by your debtors. So if
that's so. I was going to go back to the one, and that's a solid point, because what was the best thing about working with you guys was effectively you helped us create a process as a first step, and that was super helpful, because then it's that diligence in following the process and making sure the team follows the process, which was, it's funny how when you use an external company, it seems to make it easier internally.
Yeah. But I'm not sure exactly how it worked with you internally, but like we can be the bad person either to your debtor or internally saying, we need this to happen. And, sometimes, you have other things to worry about, Steve. You don't want to be like getting cranky at anyone for, receivables. Really, that's the last thing you kind of want to be thinking about. So, that's our job to just be following that. So, so again, setting up the processes and then making sure people follow it, both internally and the debtors. So we're on, we're accountable. We're keeping the debtors accountable, because they'll say, well, no worries, we'll pay in 3-7 days, no worries. But on that day, we'll call, hey, just making sure you're making that call or you're making that payment. And they'll be like, far out. I really do kind of need to stick to what you're doing. So I think that, and I think that gets people a lot of the way there with their receivables process. And then there's obviously the escalation points from there if necessary, but generally that kind of process will help the majority of businesses.
And I'm going to throw this word in there. This might sound strange as we're talking about sort of collecting money and sort of talking about debtors and creditors, but from a leadership perspective, right? Yes. Everything you talk about with your team is about how you can add value to your clients.
Yes.
And the reality is, spending your team's resources on trying to chase money, especially when you're a smaller team, it's taking away from that delivery of your product. And that was what I found for me. It's funny how the more you sort of got embedded into the way we work, the more we started actually then focusing on how can we, like our customer success area, become so much more of a focus as part of that. I said, because we aren't having to dedicate resources.
You could reallocate resources to more
correct
areas. Yeah.
Correct.
That makes sense.
And for you, when you and just to break this down for companies, what are some of the common things you see in companies in working with their debtors before you step in?
Yeah, it's the lack of communication. What do you call it? Recorded communication, as in like email trail. And I often found that there's external spreadsheets. So spreadsheets on spreadsheets. You say something, hey, where's this debtor? Can you give us a report on our debtors? And there will be like a spreadsheet that's dated quite a while ago. So you're already like, that's a red flag that the spreadsheet's dated. There's no discernible process or pattern in that spreadsheet. So you're trying to work out, then Steve, we'll get to cognitive learning. But you look at this spreadsheet and you're like, I have no idea what's going on. I can't get a gauge for who's been contacted, who hasn't, who's been contacted when, what's a priority. And so I think it's, like I said, it's really just setting up the systems and where possible, just trying to centralize and having a centralized point where everybody knows that the central information is there and they're all working from the same place. So Xero and some of their add-ons have done a really good job in doing that. So that's what we'll try and push. And I think, as you were saying before, we try and keep things to be as efficient as possible. We'll always try and partner with tech and where possible to try and make things more efficient, like I said, so that we can reallocate resources where more necessary.
Yeah. And just from a founder's experience, from what you've seen, how have you seen as far as when you start working with them, when you see their offload that area, what do you typically see happen with the companies that are following that?
Yeah. So like you said, I think it does get them to be able to reallocate things in different areas. It's the freeing up of the mind. It's like you can tell that the founder typically is reserving parts of their brain just to remember something. So it's like, talking like as a founder, you'd say, I need to remember that so-and-so hasn't paid yet. That's quite critical, because if they haven't paid, I'm not going to make this payment, or whatever. So that stays in the back of your mind. That does not go, right? As the founder, as the leader of your business, if money doesn't come in, you can't pay money out. And that's probably the thing that keeps people up all night, particularly if you have, employees and wages and things like that to be worrying about. So I think being able to say, and it takes a little bit of time to build that trust, but being able to say, we will take care of that for you. You can actually let that part of that little bit of your memory go, because we're going to proactively report to you. Because you don't need to retain it, because at a set date, we're going to say, this is where it's at. Here's everything. So you don't need to retain it, because we're going to come to you with it proactively. And I think the thing that I'm most passionate about outside of the systems and processes is kind of seeing that slight relaxation, or that slight relief in those small areas, and I'm trying to build on that. So that's just one part. That's just on receivables and something like that. But maybe say a founder may not know exactly how their business is performing, so making sure that we're reporting back instead of them having to chase and be like, I wonder, are we profitable this month? Are we profitable this week? I have a gut feel, but what do the numbers actually say? Being able to report that back. And I think there's a relief either way. Like, say you may not be profitable.
Relief is a great word, and I think the way you describe it it sits in your head. There are things that sit in your head, right? Because that from a founder's perspective, your team members, said often they won't have the same sort of passion about collecting money as what you do, right? So, and making sure that the payments get done. So, because obviously that's what, and said, just understanding that the core of this is really about understanding how we can create the basically headspace to make sure that us as business owners can keep on growing the business. And instead of actually thinking about that detail of, has this person paid, you're sitting there being creative about new ideas. Yeah. So that additional cognitive capacity you have is used for something productive rather than something reactive.
Like getting that deal done, or whatever.
Correct.
You need, pushing that. And
correct. Or creating new deals.
Yes, correct. Yeah. So I agree completely.
Now let's get onto this topic, right? Because basically, me and you had an earlier discussion, sort of what we're going to go through on this call, and we got onto this subject of decision-making fatigue. Yeah. Now, I love this as a topic. I did come across it beforehand, and then you talked about how you sort of discussed it internally, as a sort of leadership exercise. Yes. So, firstly, discuss what decision-making fatigue is, because it is real for every founder. Yeah. And how what sort of systems you use to implement, and what sort of leadership you provide your team on this as an area.
In summary, it's the theory that we have a finite resource. And I think we link decision fatigue with cognitive capacity. Like we kind of think of them as fairly synonymous. I think in a scientific term they are not, but I like to link those two theories. But we have a battery that's full at the beginning of the day, and it slowly depletes as we make decisions. And I think if you think about it and you break down your day, so if you're either commuting in or driving in, you've probably already made 50 decisions, like small ones. Like, am I going to run this yellow? Am I not? Should I turn here? I'm going to take that. So you get there. And I think all those, there are small ones and there are big decisions to be made. I think that there's studies that show, I think the breakthrough study was, they studied judges' decisions in America and how the guilty, not guilty over the day. And there was actually a strong correlation between a judge choosing the easiest course of action for him leading up to lunch. So he would spend more of his cognitive capacity and make maybe better decisions for perhaps the alleged criminal at say 10 o'clock, but that would take effort. He would say, okay, I think maybe a parole or a community service sentence would be easier, and he may go against the recommended sentence by the district attorney. But that takes a little bit of cognitive capacity to be able to do that. Closer towards lunch, before the break, when they're getting hungry and you've used a little bit of cognitive fatigue, it will just take the DA's advice. I think the sentence should be 3 years in prison. Done. You know, and I think similarly for us, that I think that's something that can happen quite a lot. If like you said, if you're a business owner and founder, and you're probably making a lot of you will be making a lot of the bigger decisions because the buck stops with you. So I think depending on what
and just quickly, when you make those decisions, like I always explain this to my team, when they come in and ask me one question, for them, I give them an answer that may be 5 seconds long, right? But what they don't know is I've fired off 6 or 7 different questions in my head to answer that one question. As far as, is it aligned with our brand? Yes. Is it aligned with another strategy that we're working on? Does it interfere with a corporate partner that we've got to work? Does it interfere with a client? Does it add value? You know, I've fired off all those questions in my head to get to that one answer. So for them, it feels like it's a simple experience. For me, I've answered 7 questions.
And there's years of experience that you have to be able to do that quite quickly as well, right? So I think we'll go back to what you were saying about what did I do with the team. So I think I obviously must have had a challenging week or something like that. And I went back to my notes. I went back to my notes and did my research. And I was like, okay, I think I just need to communicate this. And I think the easiest way for me to do this was to relate it back. And the ultimate goal was to protect each other. It's actually the way we position it and say, I want to protect your decision-making capacity. Can you also please help me protect mine? And let's speak to everyone in the team and let's all help each other. And it's saying, like, you know, just if we don't need to be asking each other basic decisions, don't. If we don't need to be CC'd, if you don't need to be CC'd on emails, don't. If they don't need to be included in meetings, don't. Because you do have that finite capacity. And the way I was able to relate it back, because sometimes, like, if I came across it like that, quite dry, quite business-wise, just talking about emails and meetings, you know, they can be like, oh, you know, that's great. But you relate it to something more personal, and you say something like, do you ever get home at 6 p.m. and you've done all the deals you could possibly do? You've had conflict, and you had all kinds of things. It's been a big day. It's one of those days, maybe 8 Zoom meetings in the day, whatever it's been. And you get home, and your partner is happy to see you and chatting at you, and you're not unhappy, but you're actually probably happy. But it's just hard for you to talk because you've just spoken for 12 hours straight. And then also just a decision, say, oh, what do you feel like for dinner, is the hardest decision you've ever made in your life. That's how it feels in that moment, and it creates this frustration. And everybody relates to that quite easily because I think everybody's had that. And it's saying, okay, there's nothing wrong in that understanding and trying to explain that nothing's wrong in that situation. It's just the understanding that you or your partner both have probably reached a certain point. And unfortunately, you're probably the first person that each other have seen to make in that little gap since work. And you're now making this decision, and it seems almost trivial dinner-wise, and that's maybe why you're like, it's so trivial, I can't answer this right now. Like, I just need half an hour to pet my dog. I don't know, like, I just need something.
We need half an hour to go into our nothing box.
Yeah. I need to watch, like, Green Space for a little while. So, and then the team understood, like, you know what, actually that makes sense. But the key thing is explaining it you can't just say, stop asking me a decision. Like, stop asking me
correct.
That's horrible. You say, hey, please keep asking me questions, the right questions, or just also, and we're just going to get to like cognitive loading and how to help that or how to hack that. It's help me also make the decision. So come at me with the right data. So I think, as you were saying, Steve, before, when you ask yourself 7 questions kind of in your head to kind of come up with that succinct, easy answer, it does help if they do come with a lot of the info that you need to make that decision and proactively tell it to you, as opposed to you asking questions. So
that's a really good one, because I remember a couple of years ago, I get really frustrated because I get asked questions and there'd be zero context to the question.
And your brain's just going into overload. Yeah.
Yes. And you see they're going like,
I know that exact face you mate. Because so someone busts into your room. What do I do about this? And I'm like, which client? Or my favorite one is the FYI. Yeah.
And it's just an email. And you're like, okay, what am I FYI? You're like, do you want an action from me? Do you want a response? Is there a question to this? You know.
So just quickly, my yesterday's, I did my monthly leadership topic yesterday, and I based it off Boston Consulting Group's new management. So they released a big document at the end of last year called "The End of Management as We Know It," talking about agile leadership and things like this.
Yeah.
And there's just 5 points. I can't remember all of them off the top of my head. There's a 5-point thing about how to measure kind of your new agile leadership. One of them was bias towards action. And so I actually got my team to score themselves, and then I obviously did myself, and I also did it across the team. So across the 5, bias towards action internally was probably our lower, was the one. So it was the one that we need to work on a little bit more. And basically, just going to your point about that FYI thing, where like that's banned, like you can't do that because there is no action. So I think by and large we try and defer action because it's almost decision making or helping getting towards decision making, and is using some of that resource. But yeah, we cannot say FYI without an action, or you need to literally say no action required. You actually need to say
yes.
No action required. For your information, or maybe write importance and urgency. Give some context. Not urgent, not important. FYI, no action required. And then you will read that email below with a much calmer disposition. But also, just with any email or thing, just put things into motion. What is the very next step? The very next one. Do you need to speak to him or her, or do you need to get that? What's just the next step? Let's just keep it moving. And I think that's the best thing to kind of get things going.
So we've talked around a couple of topics in this area. So let's try and summarize it, right? What would you say would be minimum 3 or 5 key action items for helping teams protect their cognitive capacity during the day, and leaders, obviously, leaders and their teams to protect their cognitive capacity? What would be your top 3 to 5 tips in doing that?
So it would be how we present information to each other, even before the decision. So think about emails, keep them succinct and organized well, dot points, 3 to 5 dot points.
Yes, that is a fantastic, you said that last time and I was like, thank you. That is a win.
But that's it benefits everyone. It benefits so the sender has to know exactly what they're talking about. So their thoughts will be more considered. So it'll be a better question, better phrased. You will interpret it with a lot less cognitive load. You'll have to use less cognitive ability, less RAM, less to be able to make the decisions. You make a better decision. And all that decisions available. So present information easily to each other. Minimize the amount of decisions that you have to. So don't give decisions willy-nilly, or and don't just keep, because it often is a lazy thing. All right, if you can do it, do it by yourself. And I understand that sometimes you may be getting close to hitting your capacity, or you may be protecting subconsciously. Maybe protecting your own capacity, so you're going to offload it to someone else, right? Often someone above you, but then that's not conducive to anyone as well. So of course we need to help and support each other. This is by no means are we saying everyone runs their own race, but like I'm just saying, just think about when the right times to be asking those kinds of questions are. And the third point I'd say is to communicate it very clearly to everyone around you, or to the key points. So if you have key reports, up or down or sideways, the people that interact with you most, communicate this as well. And share some of the data, share some reports. And there's very simple ones. You could literally go on YouTube, type in decision fatigue. There are really great infographics that summarize it in 5 minutes. And anyone can understand and get it. Because I think we can maybe talk about it a little bit too scientifically, but it's really quite simple. Just you have a finite resource and it drains. Right? It's quite simple. So share that information and talk about protecting each other about it, and trying to make that thing. So I think communication overall, if you keep this consistent though.
I was going to say the simple one for me is that I share my calendar with my entire team, right? For me, so they understand that if I'm not replying straight away, if I've got a team member messaging me right now, the reason I'm not replying is because I'm in this discussion with you, right? So the challenge with that was then all of a sudden meetings started arriving in my calendar, and I would get to the meeting and I'd be like, I actually don't even know what this meeting's about. I don't know, you know, so preparation in that sort of communication, I would ask, so great, we're having, what are the key points, what are the 5 key points in that discussion? Yeah, correct.
No, so yeah, I think like, there should be no meetings without agendas. One thing we did, Steve, at this, was it the start of this year? I think it was the end of last year, so the end of 2019, we reviewed our operational rhythm as a team. So our COO was in charge of that, Natalia, and we went through and notated every meeting that we have, which department, who's involved, agenda, and when it's mapped out like that, you're like, what the hell is this? You know, like, or you're like, those are the same meetings. Is there a reason we're doing them twice? Cut that one. The agenda of that is the same as that one. So are we combining them? Why are they left out of that? Cut that one out. And we streamline the operational rhythm for the team and try to just clear space, right? So, you know, one of the things that they say as leaders is our job is to just try and clear the path for the team and to just help them get over little hurdles and barriers and to just keep clearing out in front of them so they can, you know, shoot out and do what they need to do. And I think that was a really critical thing for us to do, is to review our operational rhythm. And then within that, that's the team's operational rhythm, review your own. So I am guilty of it, but I meant to be blocking out lots of certain time blocks in my calendar to do things that I just need to do. So to avoid what you just said, just having people fill it with meetings, and they will. You know, there's meetings that need to be had, but you also need to have the discipline to protect your own rhythm to achieve what you need to achieve as you know, as a business owner and a founder. So, you know, my primary goals are, you know, new business development, and I need to be chasing my opportunities and keeping up those touch points. But if I don't manage and I don't have the discipline to manage my calendar well, I'll end up being quite reactive. I'll have a full day of reactionary activity as opposed to proactive activity where I'm chasing, saying, hey, any luck with this opportunity? Can I help? Hey, can we help with this opportunity and do that? And that, you know, I'm meant to be doing that, you know, 2-3 times a week, and that's up to my discipline to be blocking that out. So yeah, I completely agree with what you're saying there.
And okay, and as a sort of final guidance, I suppose, for founders and even investors that are working with their investee companies, what are some of the key things that you've learned? Like, you get to work with companies that, you know, at the core element, right, of the cash collection. So what are the key things that you've learned from some of the most successful sort of founders that you've worked with? What are some of the habits that you've seen that they've been really effective at sort of implementing?
I think this stands out to me because maybe like it's the area that I think I need to work on most. But the most successful trait isn't like, you know, natural talents or anything like that. It was just discipline, their ability to consistently do things almost robotically. But, you know, not so. Let's say, like, trying to bring it back to something more personal. It's like, you know, how disciplined am I with exercise? Well, I'm not that disciplined with it, but I tend to find that some of the most successful, or the people that I see really like kind of churning through with a high degree of success, or they are able to do it consistently, and you know, they're just built in. And I think their time management just seems to be good. And so I think there's a lot of things around that. It's that discipline, time management, and also just the right amount of no compromise. So, you know, like, Noel, do you want to go to the pub? I think I'm most likely going to say yes. You know, but I'd need to be able to say no more and flex the no muscle and not compromise on my time as much. And I think that having that discipline to continually do what you need to do in the right times is what really propels
just on the exercise part, right? We'll just sort of finish off here. On the exercise part, one of the best lessons I learned from someone was that I was doing a sort of training with them, and they said the easiest way for me from exercise is I just put it in my calendar as a meeting.
Yep.
And what people don't know is a meeting with myself. So if basically someone says, do you want to, you know, can you come to this? It's like, apologies, I've got a meeting. Yeah. No one knows that that's your meeting at the gym, right? Yeah. But that's what it is. That's the simplest, most effective way that I've found to make sure that is. I
have it in my calendar today, Steve, and I will go.
Well, look, Noel, thanks so much for the time today, mate. So I really enjoyed it. And look, I want to delve into these more with you. I know you sort of take up, and what I loved about our sort of first conversation, you make it a habit, and this is your discipline, right? Yeah. Where you said about once a month you have a leadership meeting. And what you enjoy doing is you enjoy delving into a topic for a month that you then present to the team as far as leadership. And I straight away saw that as a weakness in myself, that I thought, you know what, that's something that I should look at implementing as well. And I think, you know, going forward, I wouldn't mind sort of having further conversation with you about some of these different topics that you're sort of delving into, because I think it's fun if we can actually help each other improve the efficiency in how we operate, whether it be collecting money, whether it be saving our cognitive capacity, whether it be team leadership, whether it be, you know, whatever area it's covering, right? It just doesn't irrelevant of sector. We've all got that same issue.
Great.
And
Correct. Yeah.
So, you know, really appreciate the time and look forward
Thanks,
to further discussions.
Likewise. Thank you.
Thank you.